She woke up at 3 in the morning with her heart racing. It wasn't a nightmare. It was the sudden realization that she had achieved everything she had planned. The apartment, the job, the stable relationship. And yet she felt like she was living someone else's life. She got out of bed quietly, went to the window and stood there, looking out at the empty city, wondering when she had stopped recognizing her own life. There was no sadness, just a huge emptiness and the certainty that something inside her was starving. Some people spend their entire lives believing that the feeling of emptiness will go away when they reach their next goal, when they achieve what society has promised will bring them peace, when they finally get to where everyone said was important to get to. But there are people who get there and realize that the emptiness remains. Worse, it increases. And along with it comes a silent question that paralyzes you in the middle of the night. If I've achieved all this and still feel this way, what's wrong with me? The truth is there's nothing wrong. At least not in the way you were taught to think about it. This chronic dissatisfaction, this feeling that something is always missing even when you should be happy, is not ingratitude. It's not imposter syndrome. It's not a lack of gratitude or pathological ambition. It's something much deeper and much scarier. It's your conscience refusing to accept a comfortable lie. Because most people can live with ready-made answers. They can believe that the social formula study, work, buy, marry, reproduce, consume will result in fulfillment. But there are consciences that cannot accept this. Not by choice, not out of rebellion, but because something inside them simply cannot close its eyes to the emptiness that lies behind superficial achievements. Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers about human nature, said something that seems cruel but is liberating. Desire is the essence of our existence, and desire is never satisfied. Not because you are defective, but because it is the nature of human desire to continue desiring. You are not seeking fulfillment. You are seeking temporary relief from the insatiable nature of existence itself. And when you realize this, when you truly understand it, something changes. You stop blaming yourself for never being satisfied and begin to understand that this dissatisfaction may be the only honest response to a life that requires you to pretend to be complete. And that's where the real problem begins. Because when you can no longer pretend, when you can no longer accept the answers that work for others, you become someone no one understands, including yourself. And that loneliness, that feeling of being out of place in a world that seems satisfied with so little, is not accidental. It has a reason for existing. And maybe, just maybe, it's the only thing keeping you from dying spiritually while you're still breathing. Think about how many times you've thought, when I achieve this, everything will be fine. When you earn more, when you change jobs, when that person finally sees you, when you finish that project, when you have what you're missing, and then you achieve it. And for 2 or 3 days, there's relief. A good feeling, until suddenly it empties. And you're back where you started, looking at the life you've achieved and feeling that there's something missing that you can't even name. This is not a flaw, it is lucid, because what society sells as fulfillment is in fact temporary distraction. Schopenhauer understood this with brutal clarity. He said that human life oscillates like a pendulum between the suffering of unfulfilled desire and the boredom of achieved satisfaction. You suffer when you don't have what you want. And when you finally have it, you realize that it wasn't as important as you thought, not because you chose wrong, but because no external achievement can fill a void that is by nature internal and existential. There are people who manage to live without realizing this. They manage to believe that the next purchase, the next promotion, the next trip will bring that permanent peace. And, in a way, they live more peacefully because they don't question it. But you can't. You've already bought what they wanted you to buy. You've already achieved what they said would bring you happiness. And you've discovered that behind every achievement there is an even greater emptiness, because now you don't even have the illusion of hope. You know that achieving it doesn't solve anything. And then comes the guilt, the shame. Why can't I be happy with what I have? Why do I always want more? Why is nothing enough? And you start to think that the problem is you, that you're greedy, that you're ungrateful, that there's something fundamentally broken in your ability to feel satisfaction. But the truth is different. You're feeling the real structure of human existence. Most people don't feel it because they're numbed by distractions or because they've never stopped long enough to notice. But you notice, and it hurts. Because noticing this means being alone with a truth that no one wants to hear, that maybe there is no getting there, that maybe the promise of future fulfillment is the big lie that keeps people functioning within a system that needs them to keep wanting, buying, waiting. And you, without meaning to, without asking, burst that bubble. You saw that the emperor has no clothes. And now you have to continue living in a world where everyone else still believes in the fantasy, while you can no longer. That constant hunger, that feeling of incompleteness, is not a sign that you need more therapy, more self-help, more achievements. It's a sign that your psyche refuses to accept cheap substitutes for something it knows doesn't exist in the form you were promised. You're not looking for success, you're looking for meaning. And meaning can't be bought, conquered, or achieved. It's built, faced, and assumed. But no one taught you that. They taught you to consume ready-made answers. And when those answers stop working, you find yourself exactly where she was at 3 in the morning, standing before your own life, not recognizing it, not knowing how to go back, but also unable to move forward, pretending that everything is fine. And the worst part is that you know you can't talk about it. Because if you try to explain to someone who has everything and still feels empty, they will tell you that you need gratitude. They'll give you books on mindfulness. They'll remind you of those who have less, as if the problem were a lack of perspective, not an excess of awareness. As if you were complaining on a full stomach, when in fact you are dying of existential hunger in the midst of a feast of things that feed nothing that really matters. So you learn to keep quiet. You learn to smile when you achieve something. You learn to say, "I'm fine" when asked. And inside, that hunger continues. That feeling of always chasing something that, when you catch it, disappears in your hands like smoke. And with each cycle, each empty achievement, each time you realize that it wasn't, you move a little further away from the people who still believe. And you sink a little deeper into a loneliness that no one sees, but that you carry with every breath. And there's something cruel about that, because you didn't choose to be this way. You didn't decide one day that you were going to stop being satisfied with the normal things that satisfy normal people. It just happened. You woke up one day and realized you couldn't fake enthusiasm anymore. You could no longer celebrate achievements that seemed empty. You could no longer participate in the collective illusion that everything is moving towards some good place. And now you carry this alone, this heavy awareness that maybe life doesn't have the ready-made meaning they promised, and that maybe you're the one who needs to build one from scratch, without a manual, without guarantees. And the worst part is that you keep trying, you keep searching, you keep hoping that maybe this time, with this achievement, with this change, with this person, you will finally feel what everyone says you should feel, but deep down you already know. You already know it won't happen. You already know that the emptiness will still be there, waiting, right after the initial euphoria passes. And yet you try, because the alternative, accepting that perhaps there is no such thing as complete and permanent satisfaction, is too terrifying. So you get stuck in this cycle, desiring, achieving, emptying, desiring, achieving, emptying. And each time the interval between achievement and emptiness gets shorter. Each time you realize more quickly that it wasn't it. And each time it gets harder to delude yourself again, until you reach a point where you can't do it anymore. You can no longer believe your own lies. You can no longer pretend that the next goal will be different. And then you stand still, with this hunger burning inside, not knowing where to look for food anymore. And it is at that moment, at that exact moment of paralysis, that something can change. Not because you found the answer, but because you finally stopped looking in the wrong places. Because you finally understood that emptiness is not a problem to be solved with external achievements. It is a fundamental characteristic of being alive and conscious. And maybe, just maybe, learning to live with it rather than against it is the only real form of peace that exists. But reaching this understanding requires crossing a desert that most people don't even know exists. And you are right in the middle of it, feeling every grain of sand burn. And that's exactly why you need silence when others need noise. That's why you cancel appointments, make excuses, choose to be alone even though you know they'll think you're strange. It's not that you hate people. It's just that being around them when your head is in this state is like trying to listen to soft music in the middle of a construction site. You lose track. You lose connection with yourself. And you come home more tired than when you left because you spent energy pretending to be present when your mind was screaming to be quiet. There's a word for that. And it's not antisocial. It's necessity. Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher who spent his life writing about anguish and authenticity, understood this deeply. He talked about the despair of living a life that isn't yours, about how most people live on autopilot, following social scripts without ever stopping to ask, but is this me, or is this what I was taught to be? And he said that this question, this existential doubt, can only be faced alone, because the answers others give you don't work. They work for their lives, not yours. So you isolate yourself. Not out of misanthropy, but for survival. Because when you're alone, you don't have to explain why you're quiet. You don't have to justify why you're not excited about the things that should excite you. You don't have to carry the weight of disappointing people for not being who they expected you to be. You can finally just exist. No performance, no masks, no constant effort to translate your inner world into a language that makes sense on the outside. And there is something deeply exhausting about being with people who can't understand that. They talk about the same subjects. They complain about the same things. They laugh at the same jokes. And you're there trying to participate, trying to fit in, but inside there is an immense distance, as if you are watching everything from behind a glass. You listen, you respond, you even smile, but you're not really there, because what worries you, what consumes you, what really matters to you doesn't fit into casual conversation. And trying to force it only makes you feel lonelier than if you had stayed home. So you start to avoid it, not because you don't like company, but because the wrong company is worse than loneliness. Because when you're alone, at least loneliness is honest. You know you're alone. But when you're surrounded by people and still feel completely isolated, that's when it becomes unbearable. Because you realize that the problem isn't a lack of people around you. It's a lack of people who really see you. And that hurts in a way that no physical loneliness can hurt. And people don't understand. They think you're pulling away out of pride, out of arrogance because you think you're better than others. But that's not it. You're just tired of pretending. Tired of smiling when there's nothing funny. Tired of saying everything is fine when it clearly isn't. Tired of participating in social rituals that seem empty, superficial, performative, while inside you're falling apart trying to understand something that no one else seems to see. And the worst part is that you can't explain it without sounding dramatic, without sounding like you're exaggerating. Because how do you tell someone, I need to be alone because being with you makes me feel like I'm dying inside, without sounding completely insane? How do you explain that the trivial conversation, the automatic laughter, the plans that everyone else finds normal make you feel like you're betraying yourself, without them thinking you're having a breakdown? So you keep quiet and you isolate yourself more. And every time you decline an invitation, every time you make up an excuse, every time you choose your own company over theirs, you know you're building a wall. But you prefer the wall to the falsehood. You prefer real loneliness to fake connection. Because at least alone you don't have to lie about who you are. At least alone you can breathe. And there's something strange about all this. The more you isolate yourself, the clearer it becomes who you really are. Because when there's no one telling you what to think, what to feel, what to do, you finally hear your own voice. And it says things you were suppressing. It asks questions you were avoiding. It shows you that maybe the life you're living isn't the life you want. And that maybe the only way to find out what it is to spend enough time alone to hear it without interference. But that comes at a price. The price is that people drift away. The price is that they think you've changed, that you've become weird, that you're not well. And maybe you are, but not in the way they think. You're not unwell because you're alone. You're unwell because you realize that the alternative to loneliness was a lie. And now you can't go back. You can no longer pretend that everything is fine. You can no longer smile and wave and participate in a life that isn't yours just because it's more comfortable for others. And the further you move away, the more you realize that this exile was not a choice. It was inevitable, because there are things that can only be understood in solitude, truths about yourself that only appear when there is no one around to distort, to give their opinion, to convince you that you are wrong about what you feel. And these truths are uncomfortable. They show you that maybe you've spent years living on autopilot, that maybe you've made important decisions based on what others expected, not what you wanted, that maybe you've built an entire life on foundations that aren't yours. And when you realize this, when you really see it, there's no going back. You can no longer convince yourself that everything is fine. You can no longer participate in empty conversations, plans that make no sense, celebrations of achievements you don't value. You stand there in your corner, watching a world that continues to turn as if nothing has changed, while inside you everything has fallen apart and is being rebuilt in a way that no one can see. And maybe that's why loneliness becomes a refuge. Not because it's comfortable, it's not. But because it's the only place where you don't have to pretend you still believe the lies that sustain social life. The only place where you can be brutally honest with yourself without fear of judgment. The only place where the mask can come off and you can finally take a deep breath and ask, who am I really when no one is looking? And that question changes everything. And it is precisely in this loneliness, in this forced silence, that you begin to realize something disturbing. You can't just let things happen. You can't relax and trust that everything will work itself out. Because behind every situation, you see chaos waiting. You see the variables that no one else is considering. You see the problems that will arise if someone doesn't do something. And that someone inevitably ends up being you. It's not that you want to control everything. It's not a conscious desire for power or a neurotic need for organization. It's something deeper and more exhausting. It's the inability to ignore what you see. You notice when something is about to fall apart. You notice when people are making bad decisions. You notice when there are consequences that no one is anticipating. And once you see it, you can't just look the other way and let it happen. So you intervene, you organize, you take charge, you carry the load, and people learn this quickly. They learn that you will hold everything together, that you won't let things fall apart. that they can count on you when no one else wants the responsibility, and you become, without realizing it, the invisible pillar that supports everything around you, while inside you are cracking under the weight. Nietzsche spoke about this in a brutal way. He said that those who see beyond herd morality, beyond the rules and beliefs that everyone accepts without question, carry a burden that others don't even know exists. Because most people live comfortably within collective illusions. They believe that the world works in a certain way, that certain things are true, that everything will work out if they follow the rules. But you see the cracks. You see that the rules don't make sense. You see that the world doesn't work the way they promised. And that puts you in an impossible position. You know too much to rest. And the worst part is that no one thanks you. No one sees how much you're holding together. Because when you do your job well of keeping things running, everything seems to be going well naturally. People don't realize how many times you've prevented something from falling apart. They don't realize how many nights you've spent awake solving problems that weren't even yours. They don't realize the weight you carry every day just to maintain the illusion that everything is under control. And when you fail, because inevitably you will fail, because it's humanly impossible to control everything, then they notice you. Then they hold you accountable. Why didn't you solve this? Why did you let it happen? As if it were your obligation. As if you had signed an invisible contract where you took responsibility for everything and everyone around you. As if the fact that you can see the problems automatically makes you responsible for solving them. And you try to explain. You try to say that you can't take it anymore. That you need others to take responsibility for themselves. That you can't be the only adult in the room all the time. But they don't understand. They think you're exaggerating. Just delegate. Just relax. Just stop worrying so much. As if it were a choice. As if you could just turn off the part of your brain that sees the chaos and choose to be ignorant like them. But you can't. Because you've tried. You've tried to step back. Let things roll. Trust that others will take care of it. And what happened? Everything fell apart, just like you knew it would. And in the end, who had to clean up the mess? You. Always you. So you learned that it's easier to just take charge from the start. Easier to carry everything yourself than to watch the disaster happen and have to rebuild afterwards. And that exhausts you. It consumes you. It turns you into someone who can no longer enjoy anything because you're always on alert. Always anticipating problems. Always planning contingencies. Always ready to intervene when something goes wrong. You no longer live, you manage. You manage other people's lives. You manage situations that no one asked you to manage. You even manage things that you know rationally you can't control. And there's a specific loneliness in that. Because you're surrounded by people but no one really shares the burden with you. No one is seeing what you see. No one is feeling the pressure you feel. You are carrying the world on your shoulders like Atlas in Greek mythology. But unlike him, no one even knows you exist. No one looks up and recognizes that you're the only reason the sky is not falling. And the cruelest part? You know you can't let go. Because if you let go, everything falls apart. And you'll have to watch. You'll have to see the people you love suffer the consequences. You'll have to deal with the guilt of knowing you could have prevented it if you had kept holding on. So you keep going. You keep carrying. You keep controlling. Even though you know it's killing you inside. Because the alternative, watching everything fall, is worse than the weight. And there are days when you look at your life and realize you've become a hostage to your own ability. A hostage to the fact that you can see further, predict more scenarios, anticipate more problems than the people around you. And that which should be a gift has become a prison. Because you can't switch off. You can't just be irresponsible, be frivolous, be careless like others seem to be able to be so easily. And perhaps the most painful thing is realizing that this compulsion for control has not brought you peace. It has brought the opposite. It has brought constant anxiety, hypervigilance, the feeling that if you relax for a second, everything will fall apart. And maybe it will. But then you ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth living in this state of permanent tension just to prevent bad things from happening? Is it worth sacrificing your own sanity to maintain the illusion of order in a world that is by nature chaotic? And you don't have an answer, because letting go of control means accepting chaos. It means watching things go wrong when you know you could have prevented them. It means feeling guilty for not doing anything when you had the ability to do so. So you get stuck in this limbo, too tired to keep carrying the weight but unable to let go. And no one understands, no one sees, no one recognizes the invisible burden you carry every day, alone in silence, while the world around you keeps turning as if everything were fine. And maybe that's why your life has always seemed to have more pain than others, more losses, more betrayals, more impossible situations that forced you to make choices no one should ever have to make. You look back and see a trail of wounds, things that broke you, people who abandoned you, Moments when you were so deep down that you didn't know if you'd ever make it back. And you ask yourself, why me? It's not self-pity. It's not dramatization. It's a real question. Why does it seem like you've been through things that others can't even imagine? Why has your journey been so much heavier, so much more difficult, so much more brutal than the journey of people around you who seem to have had relatively peaceful lives? And the easiest answer, the one everyone gives you is, it's to make you stronger. God never gives you more than you can handle. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Nice phrases, comforting phrases, phrases that are completely empty when you are in the midst of suffering and cannot see any purpose in it. When it seems that the pain is not making you stronger, it is destroying you. But Nietzsche, when he said that famous phrase about what does not kill you, was not talking about a superficial motivational force. He was talking about something much deeper and much crueler. Pain destroys who you thought you were. It burns your illusions. It shatters your certainties. It strips you of all the comfortable lies you use to protect yourself from reality. And what's left, what remains after the fire, is not a strengthened version of who you were. It's someone completely different. Someone who has seen too much, felt too much, lost too much to keep pretending. And this transformation is violent, because you don't choose to go through it. You don't ask life to break you into pieces and force you to rebuild yourself from scratch. It just happens. You're living your life, believing in certain things, trusting certain people, following certain paths, and then everything falls apart. And you find yourself on the ground, literally or metaphorically, without understanding how you got there, without understanding why this had to happen to you. But there's something that pain does that nothing else can. It forces you to be honest. When you're at rock bottom, when you've lost everything, when you have nothing left to lose, the masks come off. The pretensions evaporate. You can no longer pretend. You can no longer keep up the performance. You can no longer live up to others' expectations. You are naked before yourself. And it's terrifying, but it's real. And it is at that moment, in that absolute nakedness, that you begin to see who you really are. Not who you were taught to be. Not who you tried to be to please others, but who you are when everything else has been stripped away. And usually that person is very different from the image you had of yourself. More fragile in some ways, much stronger in others, more complex, more contradictory, more human. Pain also does something else. It connects you to others in a way that happiness never can. Because when you've truly suffered, when you've been through something that broke you, you develop a sensitivity to other people's pain that cannot be taught. You look at another person who is suffering and you recognize it. You see in their eyes what you once saw in your own. And there is a silent connection there, an understanding that needs no words. You know, and they know that you know. And maybe that's what you're being prepared to do. Not to avoid the pain of others. You've already learned that's impossible. But to be present in it. To hold the hand of someone who is going through the same fire you've already gone through and say, without words, I know, I've been here. You will survive. Not in the way you imagine, but you will. And that ability to witness another human being's pain without trying to fix it or deny it is rare and precious. And at this point in your journey, you may need more than reflection. You may need practical tools to integrate all that you're discovering about yourself. There is a method that works exactly with that, with the integration of the shadows and light that exist within you. It's called the SIM method, and it was created precisely for those who are on this journey. For those who realize that they need to work not only with what hurts, but with what that pain has revealed. If you feel you have reached a point where you need a structure to organize this internal chaos, it is worth checking out. There is a link in the description. But this is just a tool. The real work, the work of walking through fire, you are already doing. Because the truth is that no one comes out unscathed. No one goes through real pain and comes back the same. You are marked. You are left with scars that no one sees but that you feel every day. And those scars remind you, you are no longer who you were. You have been broken and rebuilt. And the person who emerged from that process is someone who knows the texture of human suffering in a way that books and theories will never teach. And maybe in the end, that's exactly what the world needs. Not more happy people giving empty advice about positivity, but people who have been through the fire, who know the taste of ashes in their mouths, who know what it really means to lose everything, and who still chose to continue. Not because they believe in happy endings or grand destinies, but because they understand that the only alternative to conscious suffering is unconscious suffering. And at least when you are conscious, when you know what you are going through and why, the pain has dignity, it has meaning, it has weight. And there's something else. Pain teaches you about impermanence, about how nothing lasts forever, neither the good nor the bad. And this awareness, though painful, frees you from unrealistic expectations. It frees you from the illusion that someday everything will be resolved, that you will reach a point where nothing will hurt you anymore. You learn that life is a constant cycle of construction and destruction, of gains and losses, of clarity and confusion. And that trying to protect yourself completely from pain is trying to protect yourself from life itself. And when you accept that, when you truly accept that pain is part of it, that it is not an anomaly but a fundamental characteristic of existence, something changes. You don't become immune. You don't stop suffering. But you stop fighting so hard against the suffering. You stop thinking there's something wrong with you because you can't always be okay. And in that surrender, in that acceptance that pain is inevitable, you find a strange kind of peace. Not the peace of the absence of pain, but the peace of no longer being at war with yourself for feeling what you feel. But even after all that pain, even after everything you've been through and integrated, there's something that doesn't go away. Restlessness. That feeling that you're never really at home. That no matter where you are, who you're with, what you're doing, there's always a part of you that wants to be somewhere else. That feels like there's something more, something different, something you haven't found yet. And the people around you interpret this as chronic dissatisfaction, as if you were one of those people who are never happy with anything, who always want more, who are never content. And maybe in a way they're right, but not in the way they think. It's not that you don't appreciate what you have, it's that you can't settle down. You can't relax and say, okay, I'm here, this is it, because something inside you knows it's not. Kierkegaard understood this restlessness in a visceral way. He called it despair, but not the obvious glaring despair that everyone recognizes. The despair of not being able to be yourself, of being stuck in a life that doesn't belong to you, even if it's a good life by external standards. Even if you've achieved what you were supposed to achieve, gotten where you were supposed to get. Because if that place, that life, that version of yourself isn't authentic, then you're desperate. Only it's a silent despair disguised as restlessness. And that despair keeps you moving. It prevents you from putting down deep roots anywhere. It makes you look at your current life as temporary, as a transitional stage, even when you know rationally that you should be settling down. People build solid careers, buy houses, make long-term plans. And you always have one foot out the door. You always have an escape plan. You always have that feeling that this isn't permanent. And there are people who think this is immaturity, an inability to commit, fear of growing up. But it's not. It's protection. Because deep down, you know that if you settle completely into a life that isn't truly yours, something inside you will die. It will rot. And you've seen this happen to other people. You've seen people who chose security, who accepted a mediocre life, who stopped questioning and settled. And you saw the light go out in their eyes. You saw them turn into empty shells, functioning on autopilot, alive but not really living. And you swore to yourself that you would never be like that you prefer the restlessness, the discomfort, the instability of continuing to search to the slow death of settling for a life that does not belong to you, even if it means never having peace, even if it means never having that feeling of I've come home that people talk about so much. Because you prefer the anguish of not knowing where you belong to the tragedy of forcing yourself to fit into a place that is too small for who you really are. This restlessness also protects you from something else, the illusion that someday everything will be resolved, that there is a point of arrival where you will finally be able to relax and stop questioning. People live chasing this fantasy, believing that when they achieve X, when they retire, when their children grow up, when they pay off their debts, then they will be able to rest. But you already know that this is a lie. You already know that there is no such endpoint, that life is not a journey with a defined destination. It is a constant process of transformation that only ends when you die. And this awareness, although heavy, gives you something valuable. It keeps you alive. It keeps you awake. It keeps you questioning, searching, trying to understand. While others fall asleep in their comfortable routines, you keep moving. And yes, it's tiring. Yes, sometimes you envy those who can simply settle down and be at peace with an ordinary life. But you can't. And deep down you don't want to. Because this restlessness, however uncomfortable it may be, is a sign that you are still truly alive. That your soul is still searching for something authentic. That you haven't given up on the possibility of a life that really makes sense, even without knowing exactly what that means. And maybe that's exactly it. This refusal to settle. This insistence on continuing to search even without guarantees. That will eventually lead you somewhere real. Or maybe not. Maybe you really are an eternal wanderer. Someone who will never find that place of rest, that feeling of this is it. And maybe that's not a problem. Maybe that's exactly who you need to be. Someone who doesn't get attached, who doesn't settle down, who keeps moving, keeps questioning, keeps searching. Not because they believe they will find definitive answers, but because the alternative is spiritual death. And there is something liberating about that when you finally accept it, when you stop fighting your own nature and understand. You weren't made for stability. You weren't made for comfortable routines and predictable lives. You were made for movement, for transformation, for constant restlessness. And that's not a flaw, it's design. And the sooner you accept that and stop trying to force yourself into a box that doesn't fit you, the closer you get to something that, if not peace, is at least truth. And truth in the end is worth more than comfort. And maybe the secret isn't to find a place where you can finally stop. Maybe it's to learn to feel at home in the movement itself, to learn to find stability not in external circumstances but in an internal acceptance that you are by nature someone who needs to keep moving. And that this is not a flaw, it's not immaturity, it's not an inability to commit, it's simply who you are. And there is a strange peace in accepting that, not the peace of arriving, but the peace of stopping fighting the fact that you never will. And in the midst of all this restlessness, all this constant movement, there is something that never stops. Your mind questioning everything, questioning everyone, questioning even yourself. You can't just accept what you're told. You can't believe the stories that everyone buys without thinking twice. You can't swallow the easy explanations, the comfortable narratives, the ready-made truths that society distributes as if they were absolute. And that tires you. God, how it tires you. Because it would be so much easier to just believe. It would be so much simpler to accept that things are as they say they are, that the world works the way you were taught, that there is meaning in the structures that everyone follows without question. But you can't. Your mind won't shut off. It won't accept, it won't rest. And the people around you think this is cynicism. They think you're negative, pessimistic, that you always see the bad side of everything. But that's not it. You're not looking for the bad side. You just can't ignore the inconsistencies. You can't pretend you don't see the contradictions. You can't accept an answer that clearly doesn't add up just because it's more comfortable than admitting that no one really knows. Nietzsche talked about this when he said that suspicion is the tool of the free spirit, that those who accept everything lose everything. Because when you swallow any narrative you're offered, when you stop questioning, you give up control of your own mind. You become manipulable, controllable, predictable, and something inside you refuses that. Something inside you prefers the exhaustion of constantly questioning to the false peace of accepting comfortable lies. But there is a price to pay for that. The price is that you never rest in any certainty. You never have that feeling of, okay, I know this is true, I can relax here. Because even the things you think you know, you question. Even your own conclusions you review. Even your own beliefs you test. And that means you live in a permanent state of uncertainty, in a permanent state of doubt. And doubt, constant doubt, corrodes. People don't understand what it's like to live like this. What it's like to wake up every day and question even the most basic things. What it's like to hear someone speak with absolute conviction about something, and immediately your mind starts looking for the holes, the flaws, the parts of the story that weren't told. What it's like to see everyone believing in something, and you're the only one there thinking, but wait, that doesn't make sense. And the worst part is when you try to share these doubts, when you try to point out the inconsistencies you see, because then they accuse you of being contrary, of wanting attention, of thinking you're smarter than everyone else, as if questioning were arrogance, not necessity, as if you chose to be this way, when in fact it chose you. Your mind simply works this way, and you don't know how to live any other way. There are times when you envy those who can have blind faith, those who can believe without questioning, those who can completely trust authorities, institutions, official narratives. It must be so peaceful to live like that, so comforting to have absolute certainties, so comfortable to know exactly what to believe, without this constant need to verify, to investigate, to doubt. But you can't. And the more you question, the more you realize how the world is built on accepted lies, on narratives that everyone repeats but no one has really examined, on truths that are truths only because everyone agrees to believe them, not because they are actually true. And seeing this isolates you even more, because now you are not only emotionally alone, you are epistemologically alone. You are questioning the very basis of shared reality. And there is something deeply lonely about realizing that the people around you are living within a matrix of unexamined beliefs, that they accept ready-made truths without ever really thinking about them, that they build entire lives on foundations they have never tested to see if they are solid. And you're here, testing every brick, questioning every structure, distrusting every certainty, and realizing that most of the things that sustain society are fragile, contradictory, built more on convenience than on truth. And then you understand. You can't go back. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't accept easy answers now that you know the difficult questions. You have become someone who lives permanently outside the matrix of comfortable certainties. And that frees you from many illusions. But it also condemns you to a life without the comfort of absolute certainty. And you don't know if this is liberation or a curse. You only know that you no longer have a choice. And there are days when this critical stance protects you. It saves you from traps that others fall into without realizing it. It prevents you from being manipulated by convenient narratives. It keeps you awake in a world that wants you to sleep. But there are other days when that same attitude exhausts you. It makes you feel like you're carrying the weight of seeing things that no one else sees, as if it were your responsibility to warn others, even though you know they won't listen, even though you know they'll call you paranoid, exaggerated, pessimistic. And the hardest part? It's questioning yourself. It's turning your own suspicion inward and asking, could I be wrong? Could I be seeing problems where they don't exist? Could my need to question everything be, in itself, a prison? And these questions have no easy answers, because it could be. It could be that you're seeing ghosts. It may be that you are so used to doubting that you have lost the ability to trust anything, including your own perceptions. But deep down you know you'd rather question too much than question too little. You know you'd rather be paranoid about dangers that may not exist than naive about those that do. You know that your constant suspicion, as tiring as it may be, is what keeps you free. Free from manipulation, free from illusions, free from living a life based on lies you've never examined. And maybe that's your contribution. Not giving answers, you're not sure enough for that, but asking questions. Questions that bother people. Questions that people don't want to hear but need to consider. Questions that dissolve false certainties and make room for more complex truths. And that is thankless work, because no one thanks those who destroy their comfortable illusions. But it is necessary. And you, without asking, have become someone who cannot help but do this. And behind all of this, the hunger, the loneliness, the control, the pain, the restlessness, the doubt, there is a wound. A central wound that defines everything, that explains everything, that connects everything. It is the wound you have always carried, the one you try to hide, heal, overcome, the one that embarrasses you because it seems so personal, so yours, so specific. But it is precisely this wound that connects you to everyone else who suffers in the same way. Schopenhauer had an idea about this that seems simple, but is devastating. He said that compassion is the recognition that all suffering is one. That when you suffer, you are not suffering something unique and isolated. You are experiencing the universal texture of human pain. And your specific wound, as personal as it may seem, is actually a gateway to understanding the collective wound. It's your particular way of feeling something that everyone else feels in different ways. And maybe that's why you feel so much. That's why other people's pain affects you as if it were your own. That's why you can't just switch off and protect yourself when you see someone suffering. Because your wound has made you porous. It has made you sensitive. It has made you unable to put up the barriers that normal people put up so they don't feel so much. And that makes you carry a weight that isn't technically yours, but feels like it is. You feel responsible for things that are beyond your control. You feel the weight of the world's suffering as if you were personally responsible for solving it. You see injustice and feel like you should do something. You see someone in pain and feel like it's your duty to alleviate it. And that's not megalomania, it's not a savior complex. It's a direct consequence of your wound dissolving the normal boundaries between you and others. You bleed together, you feel together, and you no longer know how not to feel. And there is something cruel about that, because it means you are never protected. You are never safe. You can never just live your life and worry only about your problems. The suffering of others reaches you, it penetrates you, it consumes you, and you have no way to defend yourself against it because defense would require closing the wound. And if you close the wound, you lose the only thing that makes you who you are, the ability to truly feel, to truly understand, to truly be present in the pain, yours and others. And maybe that's the big secret no one told you about wounds. They don't exist to be healed in the traditional sense. They don't exist to be closed, overcome, left behind. They exist to be transformed, to be alchemized from something that destroys you into something that defines you, from something that weakens you into something that makes you capable of a depth that others will never reach. Because your wound has taught you things that cannot be learned in any other way. It has taught you about real vulnerability, not the performative vulnerability that people post on social media. It taught you about true resilience, not the motivational resilience of self-help books. It taught you about unconditional love, not the romantic love of movies, but the love of being present in someone's pain without trying to fix it, without trying to run away from it, simply holding their hand and saying, I know, I've been there. You are not alone. And maybe that's what you came here to do. Not to fix people, not to save them, but to be present. To be the person who understands because you've been there. To be the voice that says you're not crazy, you're not weak, you're not broken. You're just feeling something very real that most people don't want to admit exists. And that ability to validate someone else's pain because you know your own intimately is a gift born of a curse, a gift you didn't ask for, but a gift nonetheless. And when you understand that, when you truly understand that your wound is not your flaw but your greatest strength, something changes. You stop trying to hide it. You stop being ashamed of it. You stop thinking you need to overcome it to be whole, because you realize it was never about being whole in the sense of having no cracks. It was about being whole in the sense of accepting all parts of yourself, including especially the broken parts. And there is immense freedom in that acceptance. Because when you stop fighting your own wound, when you stop trying to fix it or hide it, you can finally use it. You can turn it into wisdom. You can offer those around you not empty advice from someone who has never suffered, but deep understanding from someone who knows the territory. And that understanding, that authentic presence in pain, is worth more than any quick fix or motivational advice. Because in the end, people don't need you to fix their pain. They need you to recognize that the pain is real, to validate that what they are feeling is not an exaggeration, not weakness, not a defect. And you can do that. You with your open wound, with your excessive sensitivity, with your inability not to feel. You can look into the eyes of someone who is suffering and say the only thing that really matters: I see you, I feel you, you are not alone in this. And perhaps in the end, that is the most liberating truth of all. You are not broken. You're just feeling things that most people have chosen not to feel. You're not defective. You're just honest about the nature of human existence in a way that most people can't be. And your dissatisfaction, your loneliness, your control, your pain, your restlessness, your doubt, your wound, none of that is evidence that there's something wrong with you. It is evidence that you are awake, that you refuse to live asleep in a life that is not yours, that you have chosen, even without realizing you were choosing, to feel everything, see everything, question everything, rather than accept the comfortable lies that keep most people functioning on autopilot. And that comes at a price, a high price, but it also has value, a value that you are just beginning to understand. So maybe the question isn't, how do I fix this? Maybe the question is, now that I know who I am, what do I do with it? And the answer doesn't come ready-made. It doesn't come packaged. It doesn't come with guarantees. It is built, day after day, choice after choice, breath after breath. You build a life that honors who you really are, not who you were taught to be. And if you've made it this far in this video, if these words have resonated with you in some way, let me ask you a question. Which of these characteristics, the insatiable hunger, the necessary loneliness, the weight of control, the pain that shaped you, the constant restlessness, the unrelenting doubt, or the wound you carry, which one are you finally ready to stop seeing as a flaw and start seeing as an essential part of who you are? If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos, you reflect on each idea. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the white rabbit.